3 Chinese astronauts may be spending more time in orbit than planned. Their journey home has been postponed indefinitely after their spacecraft was reportedly struck by a small fragment of debris, according to Chinese state media. So, what's really happening? And are those taikonauts safe? Back in April 2025, China launched its Shenzhou 20 mission, carrying 3 astronauts to the Tiangong Space Station. Months later, their replacements aboard Shenzhou 21 arrived and docked with Tiangong on a Friday, briefly bringing the total crew to 6. After several days of joint operations, the 2 teams held a handover ceremony early Tuesday, officially passing command of the outpost to the new arrivals. Everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. Once in orbit, Shenzhou 21 successfully connected with the forward port of the Tianhe core module at 3:22 a.m. Beijing time on November 1st, 2025. The entire docking sequence took only about 3.5 hours, setting a new record for the fastest Shenzhou docking yet. After the autonomous rendezvous and link-up, the Shenzhou 21 crew entered the station through the orbital module. At 4:58 a.m., the Shenzhou 20 astronauts, already living aboard Tiangong, opened what they fondly call their home door to welcome the newcomers. It was a heartwarming scene. In one clip, a taikonaut uses a brand new space oven brought up by Shenzhou 21 to cook chicken and ribs. All 6 astronauts gave it a big thumbs up, smiling from ear to ear. Who would have guessed the Tiangong station now has not just an oven, but even a space microwave? It completely overturns the old image of bland astronaut meals. The Chinese clearly know how to make life in orbit look comfortable. But what began as an upbeat feel-good story has taken a concerning turn. The Shenzhou 20 spacecraft, the vehicle meant to carry the outgoing crew back to Earth, has reportedly been damaged by orbital debris. According to the China Manned Space Agency, the craft is suspected to have been hit by a small piece of space junk, and experts are assessing the extent of the damage and any associated risks. To protect the astronauts and ensure the mission's success, officials decided to delay the planned return of Shenzhou 20, originally scheduled for November 5th. The agency hasn't confirmed when the impact occurred, only that everything appeared normal earlier in the week. The incident underscores just how serious the space debris problem has become, especially for long-term missions. Countless fragments, from defunct satellites, spent rockets, and even tiny micrometeoroids, are whizzing around Earth's orbit. They might seem small, but at such incredible speeds, even a pebble-sized object can be deadly. To put it in perspective, a fragment just 1 centimeter wide can hit with the force of a hand grenade when moving around 10,500 miles per hour. And remember, Tiangong orbits Earth at over 17,000 miles per hour. At those speeds, there's no such thing as a harmless collision. Though these objects are invisible to the naked eye, their danger is very real. So far, no astronauts have been lost to space debris, but there have been close calls. In 2021, for instance, a small fragment punctured the Canadarm2 robotic arm on the International Space Station. And that's just one example. The upper layers of low Earth orbit are cluttered with old rocket stages left by both the U.S. and the former Soviet Union. Neither side ever agreed on cleanup, so those relics still drift in orbit. In June 2022, 2 of those abandoned stages, one Soviet, one American, passed within about 500 feet of each other. That near miss shows just how crowded Earth's orbital neighborhood has become. Scientists are racing to find ways to manage the growing cloud of debris, from nets and harpoons to lasers and robotic tugs. But so far, progress has been slow. It's essentially a waiting game between innovation and an increasingly dangerous orbit. At this point, it's unclear how serious the damage to Shenzhou 20 is. What seems likely, though, is that the crew's trip home could face delays. They've already spent more than 6 months aboard the station, so the tension is understandable. If the damage proves too severe, the Shenzhou 20 astronauts may have to return using Shenzhou 21, the very craft that just arrived. but that would leave the Shenzhou 21 team temporarily stranded in orbit until China launches another rescue spacecraft. The bigger danger comes if something else happens in the meantime, say, another debris strike causing a decompression or emergency aboard Tiangong. In that scenario, the taikonauts would have no safe evacuation option. Their only choice might be to board the damaged Shenzhou 20 and attempt re-entry, hoping it holds together long enough to bring them home. Fortunately, that scenario remains unlikely, and China almost certainly has backup plans ready. Still, it's worth understanding what such an emergency return would actually look like. The Shenzhou spacecraft consists of three main sections: the orbital module, where the crew spends most of their time, the re-entry capsule, which brings them back to Earth, and the service module, which handles power and propulsion. Before re-entry, these sections separate. The re-entry capsule continues toward Earth, while the other two burn up in the atmosphere. Landings are usually timed for early morning or late evening, so the capsule catches sunlight against a dark sky, making it easier for tracking stations on the ground to follow visually. Here's how the sequence unfolds. First, the spacecraft performs a thruster burn that rotates at 90 degrees to jettison the orbital module. That section then breaks apart as it enters the upper atmosphere. Next, the vehicle turns another 90 degrees, aligning its engines forward, and fires its main thrusters for roughly 2 minutes. This slows the craft by about 100 meters per second, just enough to allow it to slip into its re-entry path. At around 10,000 meters altitude, the 3.2-ton capsule begins deploying its parachutes. A set of small pilot chutes and a drogue chute open first, reducing its speed from about 180 meters per second to 80 meters per second. Around 8,000 meters, the main parachute unfurls. If the capsule descends faster than expected between 6,000 and 5,000 meters, a backup chute automatically deploys. Once the capsule reaches about 6,000 meters, the 280-kilogram heat shield detaches and a radio beacon activates to help rescuers track the descent. The parachute system gradually adjusts the capsule's tilt to lessen heat and then rotates it upright for a vertical landing at roughly 10 meters per second. Around 20 seconds after the heat shield drops, the astronauts' seats lift into position, cushioning them for touchdown. According to an official document from China's space agency, the country has steadily upgraded its emergency procedures to handle threats like debris impacts or leaks. The report notes that astronauts now have 5 times more time to respond to emergencies than they did during Tiangong's early years, a huge improvement in safety margins. In extreme cases, taikonauts could either return early using a docked craft or be rescued by a backup vehicle launched from Earth. Popular aerospace analyst Eugene, known online as Steve's Scarf, explained that if the current spacecraft is deemed too risky, authorities would activate Plan B, launching a standby rescue ship from the ground, likely Shenzhou 22 with its Long March 2F rocket. Together, they form China's rotating backup system, always on emergency standby to bring crews home safely if needed. So yes, China has contingency plans in place for situations like this, and judging by those clips of the crew enjoying wings and ribs aboard Tiangong, being stuck up there for a little longer might not be the worst thing imaginable. Incidents like this are exactly why China has been accelerating efforts to develop space debris removal technology. At the International Astronautical Congress in Sydney, CNSA, Vice Administrator Bian Zhigang announced that China is advancing active debris removal capabilities to combat the mounting threat of orbital clutter. The stated goal is to make Earth's orbit more sustainable, especially as China expands its own massive satellite networks. However, experts point out that the same technologies could, in theory, be used to target or disable other satellites, giving them a dual-use potential that's drawn international attention and speculation. China has already demonstrated some of these capabilities. Its Shijian 21 satellite, launched in October 2021, carried out complex maneuvers in geostationary orbit, approaching, docking, and possibly even refueling another spacecraft. The full details remain classified, but the mission showcased China's growing skill in high-precision orbital operations. More recently, the Xian-25 satellite has reportedly performed similar tests, pushing those technologies even further. All of this highlights how quickly China's presence in space is expanding. The nation now operates a fully functional space station, continues to ramp up its launch cadence, and has ambitious plans to deploy satellite constellations numbering in the thousands. At the same time, the China National Space Administration insists its focus on debris mitigation is meant to address the global issue of orbital congestion, something that's becoming more urgent every year. Still, unlike Western debris removal missions such as the European Space Agency's ClearSpace 1 or Remove Debris projects, China's approach remains largely secretive. There's little publicly available information about the specific technologies, timelines, or methods being developed, which naturally fuels questions about how purely civilian these programs really are. Technically speaking, active debris removal is no small feat. It requires extremely precise orbital maneuvering, accurate target acquisition, and safe disposal techniques that don't create even more debris. In practice, that means a spacecraft has to approach a piece of junk, using a robotic arm, net, or tether, capture it, and guide it into a controlled re-entry so that both the debris and the removal craft burn up harmlessly in Earth's atmosphere. Recent orbital data even suggests that Shijian-21 made significant trajectory adjustments after what appeared to be an in-orbit refueling, possibly positioning itself for additional debris removal demonstrations, or perhaps for missions that remain undisclosed. The push to master active debris removal sits in a gray area. It's a critical step toward keeping Earth's orbit clean, but it's also what analysts call a dual-use capability, a system that could serve both peaceful and military purposes. After all, any spacecraft capable of approaching, capturing, or maneuvering another satellite could also be used to disable or remove an adversary's satellite from orbit. That's why defense experts are watching these developments closely, raising alarms about how easily these technologies could shift from tools of sustainability to weapons in orbit. China's rapidly evolving space ambitions mirror a broader global trend, the growing militarization of space. As satellites become increasingly vital for communications, navigation, and intelligence, nations are focusing more on protecting their orbital assets and, if necessary, denying those same advantages to their rivals. For now, though, all eyes are on the crew of Shenzhou 20. Their fate will depend on just how serious the damage to their spacecraft turns out to be, and how soon China can mount a safe return mission. Until then, the world watches and waits, reminded once again that even in the vast emptiness of space, danger is never far away.